as ladies and gentlemen, today I'm going to tell you a story that's rarely told in public, often whispered about in private, and yet spans the entire history of human civilization. It's a story that starts with our earliest ancestors and continues into the digital age, shaping culture, controversy, and even technology along the way. It's the shocking history of pornography, from cave art to clicks, and it may change the way you view both the past and the present. Now, as when most people think of pornography, they think of the internet, of modern videos, websites, scandals, and headlines. But what if I told you that pornography has been with us for over 30,000 years? Long before the first alphabet, before cities or empires, before money or law, humans were making erotic art. It's right there in the archaeological record. The earliest known examples of this come from what scholars call the Venus figurines, small carved sculptures of women with exaggerated sexual features found all across Europe. These figurines, some over 30,000 years old, may have symbolized fertility, power, or beauty, but they also show something undeniable. Humans have always been fascinated by sex, and we've always turned that fascination into art. As time moved on and civilizations began to form, the expression of sexuality didn't disappear. In fact, in ancient Mesopotamia, sexual imagery was deeply connected to religion and social customs. Temple rituals included acts we'd consider erotic today, and early myths described gods and goddesses engaging in graphic romantic and sexual adventures. Sexual desire was not hidden, it was respected. In ancient Sumerian poems, divine couples were celebrated, and fertility was not only a biological fact, but a spiritual blessing. Jumping forward to ancient Egypt, the relationship between sex and art continued. In the hidden chambers of tombs, and in scrolls buried for millennia, we find illustrations of explicit sexual activity. The famous Turin Erotic papyrus, dating to around 1150 BCE, is essentially a series of illustrated sexual positions. It's drawn with humor and a sense of playfulness, proof that the Egyptians weren't shy about depicting, or perhaps even laughing at their own sexual imagination. At the same time, thousands of miles away in India, eroticism was being explored not just through images, but through philosophy, literature, and spiritual practice. The Kama Sutra, written around the 3rd century CE, wasn't merely a book of sexual positions. It was a sophisticated guide to life, love, and aesthetics. Indian temple architecture from the same period, such as that at Khajuraho, features entire walls carved with scenes of love, intimacy, and sexual ecstasy. These weren't hidden or condemned. They were part of the sacred space, testifying to a culture that saw no contradiction between the physical and the divine. In ancient Greece, as sexuality and erotic art thrived in both public and private life, as from pottery painted with erotic scenes to poetic works that explored love in all its forms, including same-sex relationships, the Greeks embraced a diverse and open exploration of desire. Their gods, after all, were no strangers to romantic pursuits. Zeus himself had numerous affairs, human and divine. The Romans took this even further. Their homes, bathhouses, and public streets were filled with erotic frescoes and sculptures. In Pompeii and Herculaneum, cities preserved by volcanic ash, archaeologists uncovered brothels with menace of sexual services illustrated on the walls, as in homes where sexual imagery wasn't hidden in a back room. It was proudly displayed in entrance halls. But then came a dramatic shift, as with the spread of Christianity across Europe and the collapse of the Roman Empire, attitudes towards sex became much more repressive. Sexuality was now viewed through the lens of sin and morality. Pleasure was suspect. Sex was tolerated only within marriage and strictly for reproduction. Erotic art was hidden, destroyed or reinterpreted as warnings against lust. The Middle Ages were a period of religious dominance where desire was something to be feared, controlled and silenced, and yet, even in this era of censorship, human curiosity did not disappear. Erotic manuscripts circulated secretly, as sometimes disguised as medical texts or religious satire. Naughty carvings appeared in the margins of church architecture, known as Sheila gigs, grotesque female figures displaying exaggerated genitalia. Despite the church's effort to control the narrative, the human imagination refused to be caged. Beyond Europe, in the Islamic world, there existed a different approach. While modesty was encouraged, erotic literature thrived. The Perfumed Garden, written in 15th century Tunisia, offered detailed advice on intimacy, pleasure, as in relationships. Erotic poetry was appreciated for its literary value. There was a recognition that sexuality was part of life and could be addressed with both reverence and elegance. Fast forward to the Renaissance, and we see Europe rediscovering its ancient roots. Artists like Michelangelo and Titian celebrated the human body in their paintings and sculptures. Nudity returned, cloaked in mythology or biblical themes to pass religious scrutiny. Erotic themes were once again present in high art. The invention of the printing press changed everything. Now, books could be mass-produced, and with that came an explosion in erotic literature. A notorious example is Imodi, a collection of sexual positions illustrated by Raimondi and accompanied by explicit poems. The church tried to suppress it, but like so many forbidden things, it only increased demand, as erotic literature was now entering the public consciousness more than ever before. During the Enlightenment, as pornography began to evolve not just as pleasure but as politics. In France, particularly before the Revolution, explicit pamphlets mocked the clergy and the monarchy. Sexual acts were used to symbolize corruption and decadence. Pornography became a tool of rebellion. At the same time, erotic novels like Fanny Hill in England were pushing the boundaries of literature, often resulting in court cases and censorship battles. The 19th century brought industrialization and new technologies. The invention of photography marked another turning point. For the first time, images of real human bodies, not paintings or carvings, could be reproduced and distributed. Erotic photographs, often called French postcards, became highly popular. Yet at the same time, society was becoming more publicly moralistic, especially in Victorian England. This contradiction was striking. A society obsessed with propriety, as yet secretly consuming more erotic content than ever. Governments cracked down. Britain passed the Obscene Publications Act in 1857, and the US followed with the Comstock laws in the 1870s. These laws banned the mailing of obscene materials, but once again, demand created its own supply. The underground porn industry flourished despite the risk of jail or worse. The 20th century was a whirlwind for pornography. The rise of cinema in the early 1900s led to the production of stag films, short, silent pornographic movies shown at private men's gatherings. These were illegal, hidden, and poorly made, but they represented a growing appetite. By the 1950s and 60s, the porn industry began to come into the mainstream, as Hugh Hefner launched Playboy in 1953, combining nude photography with high-quality journalism, interviews, and commentary. Playboy made it possible for porn to exist on your coffee table. It wasn't crude, it was classy. Penthouse and Hustler followed, pushing the limits even further. Then came the 1970s, and with it, what many call the golden age of porn. For the first time, full-length hardcore films like Deep Throat, The Devil in Miss Jones, and Behind the Green Door were shown in actual movie theaters. These films had plots, budgets, actors, and directors. Pornography was now a part of popular culture. Celebrities and intellectuals debated it on talk shows. It was reviewed in newspapers. This era also sparked fierce legal battles about obscenity and the First Amendment. In the United States, courts began to rule more frequently in favor of free expression, allowing the porn industry to expand. In the 1980s and 90s, home video changed the game again. With the rise of VHS tapes, people could watch porn at home, in private, without shame. As this revolutionized consumption, and led to the birth of pornographic empires, as companies like Vivid and Wicked Pictures became household names in adult entertainment. Adult movie stars became celebrities, the production quality increased, and the industry became more professional. Then came the internet, the most revolutionary shift in the history of pornography. By the late 1990s and early 2000s, as websites began offering images and videos to anyone with a computer, at first, access was limited by slow dial-up speeds, but as technology improved, content exploded. The creation of tube sites in the mid-2000s, like Pornhub, RedTube, made porn more accessible than ever. Content became free, instant, and unlimited. Amateur creators emerged, as smartphones and webcams allowed anyone to produce and upload explicit material. Porn became global, anonymous, and completely decentralized. But with that came new challenges. Issues of consent, exploitation, piracy, and deepfakes began to dominate the conversation. While pornography had become more diverse, accessible, and normalized, it also raised serious ethical and psychological concerns. Governments around the world began debating how to regulate online porn. Some countries attempted full bans, others introduced age verification laws. Meanwhile, a new movement called ethical porn began gaining traction. Content that prioritized performer rights, transparency, and mutual consent. And now we stand at the edge of another transformation. Artificial intelligence is creating hyper-realistic images and videos, as virtual reality allows users to fully immerse themselves in fantasy worlds. Porn is no longer just a product. It's an experience, interactive, customizable, and often free. But even in this high-tech world, the core story remains the same. It's the story of human curiosity, of desire, of the need to see, feel, and imagine. Pornography, in its many forms, has never just been about sex. It has been a mirror, reflecting our values, our fears, our power structures, and our evolving ideas about love and freedom. From the sacred figurines of prehistoric caves to the infinite digital libraries available today, pornography has walked alongside us. It has survived every effort to silence it. It has adapted to every new technology. And whether you see it as art, exploitation, liberation, or all of the above, it remains one of the most powerful and persistent forces in human culture. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the shocking, complicated, as an utterly human history of pornography, from cave art to clicks. Thank you.